let's get into the first topic, which is what is white privilege? So this is going to be interesting.
Yeah, it is. I wanted to actually bring it up with you, Carl, right? Because I watched you and Zuby, and I watched a conversation between you and Zuby, which there were some things that I disagreed on. You were talking about white supremacy, you were talking about white privilege. And I think that when it comes to white supremacy and white privilege, I think that a lot of people are confused about what it is.
Okay.
And sometimes it is rubbished. And there's like a theme that I have that it's schizophrenic and bipolar at the same time. So white supremacy, white privilege, whatever you want to call it, racism, blah, 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 is kind of schizophrenic and bipolar at the same time, which is why we are constantly talking about it and also constantly confused about it.
Okay, lay out the thesis then.
So the thesis of what I saw, let's talk about what happened on the podcast. So you said, no, it might have been Zuby actually. Let me see. Zuby said, no, you said that the term white supremacy is predicated on the fact that white people are better than others.
Yeah, that to be a white supremacist, you have to think that, right?
Right. So my thing is, as human beings, we're all equal, right? No one is better than anybody else. However, white supremacy are actions, not so much what people think. So if I give you an example, right? I'm going to read a quote, right? And it says, we bled Africa for 4.5 centuries. We looted their raw materials. Then we told lies that the Africans were good for nothing. In the name of religion, we destroyed their culture. And after being made rich at their expense, we now steal their brains through miseducation and propaganda to prevent them from enacting black retribution against us. Who do you think said that?
Martin Luther King?
No.
I don't know.
President Jacques Chirac of France, who served 3 terms, I think, at least 3 terms. Mm-hmm. So
when he said that, just out of interest,
well, after serving his terms in office, so it was after he's seen certain things that I'm not privy to, you're not privy to.
I'm thinking about the Algerian War of Independence.
Yeah.
Say again.
I'm thinking about the Algerian War of Independence.
What, when he would have said it?
Yeah, because I'm thinking the French basically had to admit, yeah, we don't goofed big time with the Algerians, if no one else.
And the French still are as well.
Well, this is the thing. So this is why I talk about the reason why I think white supremacy is confusing. Because what it is what President Jacques Chirac said. What it isn't is what the wokies and the lefties are always talking about. Oh, everybody never got a job because it's white supremacy. I don't think that's what it is. I think my thing is white supremacy needs to be called out where it does exist and not rubbished, because what happens is it kind of negates what it is, basically. It negates what it is.
So are you saying that white supremacy primarily exists in the realm of geopolitical events?
A lot of it does.
Right.
A lot of it does. And because my thing about from studying what white supremacy is, right? So I always have a little experiment. So I would say to you, are you racist?
I don't consider myself to be.
Right. I would say, that's fine, by the way. I would say, do you know any racist people?
No. not to my knowledge,
that?
Right.
Right, okay. So you don't know any racist people. Do you believe racist people exist?
Well, no, actually, okay. I do know of people who are self-avowed racists, yes.
Right. So do you believe racist people exist?
Yeah.
So what happens when I ask that question to generally to white people is that they say the same things generally. They say, oh, I'm not racist and I'm not around racists. And I'm like, okay, cool. But do you think racist people exist? And they say, yeah. And I say, well, where are they then? Right? So it's like white supremacy or racism becomes this mythological creature that everybody speaks about and admits it exists, but no one knows where it is.
I think the issue is the term racist has become synonymous with the term bad. Right. So essentially, when you say, are you a racist? What you're saying to the person is, are you a bad person? And of course, no one really thinks of themselves as a bad person. And so everyone says, no, everyone around me is a good person, therefore a non-racist. Because it seems to be that racism is taken to mean many things, but one of those things being a sort of personal intolerance of people of other races. But of course, I don't see any of that around. But then it gets abstracted into broad categorical views of civilizations. And so it occupies many layers at the same time. And so someone always takes it on the personal level as you've introduced it there and says, well, I don't find myself irrationally hating people of other races.
Right.
So I'm not a racist.
Right.
But then conversely, you've put it in the realm of geopolitical events. So it's sort of disconnected from them. So like you say, it is kind of abstracted away and it's sort of mythological. So everyone's just like, I don't know
what it is. It exists and it doesn't exist. And so when President like Jack Chirac says that, I don't know if you know who Arankana Chimhambori Quo is.
I don't.
She's a former ambassador to the African Union.
Right.
So she worked for the African Union. She no longer works there. And she speaks a lot about what the French done, right? And Jack Chirac's already said that this is what they've done. And Arankana Chimhambori Quo says that during the 1950s, and you can actually research this, that a pact to recolonize Africa was enacted by the French to the Francophone countries. And there were two countries that said no. There was Mali and there was Guinea. So Mali and Guinea said, no, we're not going to sign that pact. And then what the French proceeded to do was to pour concrete into the sewage systems of Mali and Guinea, right? And just leave. And it's like, okay, but the French haven't had any retribution or any punishment for that type of crime against humanity. If we done it in London, if the Chinese decided to pour concrete in London, the sewage system, it's an act of war. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's like, what happens is people they downplay what white supremacy actually is and what they do is that they replace it with things that, oh, this thing is too white. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, no, that's not what white supremacy is. That's what white supremacy is and not that.
If anything, it makes talking about white supremacy in European countries a bit redundant, right?
Go on.
Because geopolitically, the Europeans aren't doing things to themselves, but they are going over to Africa and doing whatever. Like the French have got a weird thing with the currency in North Africa at the moment, where it's essentially dependent on the economic situation in France.
They print the money of Africa.
And you definitely could make an argument that, I mean, white supremacy, I think, is a terrible term to use for anything because it's just inherently divisive, even if it is descriptive. But like,
why do you say it's divisive?
Well, because people feel like they're being attacked for being a racist when you say it. But you are trying to describe a series of events.
Yes.
Right? So that immediately puts people on the back foot. But if you would say, well, look, giving this specific example of France and the currency in like wherever, Guinea-Bissau, wherever it was, if you'd say, well, look, European interference is hamstringing the economy of this country, then suddenly a person isn't like, oh, I'm not a racist, because that's a true statement. That's not a statement about them.
Right.
And so then you could talk about that event and how that's unfair. Right.
Of course.
That's a post-colonial exploitation of an African country. And you absolutely could talk about that in clear terms that people aren't going to get their back up about. You know, because that's the thing. I think the problem with the using terms like white supremacy is it comes with a judgment against the person that you're using it, and not you personally, but you know, the other person that's being used against. And it just prevents any meaningful and constructive dialogue from being done. Right?
So, and that's why I wanted to talk about it, because I think that it needs to be highlighted with what it actually is, and because we know what it isn't. I think we know, like, when people start speaking about, they never got a job, white supremacy, it's like, shut up, like be quiet, like that's not what white supremacy is, right? And so it's like, but when it is what it is, I think it should be spoken about. Like, for instance, I was watching a TV show the other day talking about William Wilberforce, right? And William Wilberforce and Great Britain, you know, saying, no, we abolished slavery, 1807, right? So in 1807, the British abolished slavery. Would you say that's a good thing?
I would say so.
So would I, right? So
it's hard to disagree.
No, but you laugh, right? Yeah. But this is what I'm talking about, what white supremacy actually is, because I talk about the bipolar and schizophrenic nature of it. So 1807, we abolished slavery.
And we abolished the trade in 1807.
We abolished the trade.
And it was slavery was 1833.
1833. So 1807, the trade, 1833. So if we go to 1833, when they said absolutely nothing, right? You know what the Berlin Conference is?
Not offhand.
The Berlin Conference is a conference where 13 European nations, you had the Ottoman Empire, which isn't European, but you had France, Germany, Spain,
Well, the colonial
Norway,
powers.
the
Is this
colonial
the
powers.
scramble for Africa?
And they scrambled for Africa.
Yeah.
But I would say that you just re-enslaved people. So you can't abolish slavery and then re-enslave a continent.
I think
That's for me, that's the schizophrenic bipolar nature of what it is. Because if I say I no longer have a problem with you, I don't have a problem with you, and I've been historically hurting you and your family, and I stop, you might say, thank you very much, Sarah, don't do that. But then if two weeks later I get all my guys and I kick your door down and I take over your house, you're like, whoa, I thought you stopped messing with me.